welcome to the Storm Division pre-show. My name's Jazzleen, and joining me this evening is the wonderful Slug Hunter. Slug, how's your day going?
My day's going pretty great, Jazzy.
Get up to anything interesting on this? It's a beautiful Friday afternoon for me. I don't know if it's the same for you.
I don't know if I'd describe it as beautiful here. It's better than it has been in some degrees, but just fairly normal day. Nothing too eventful. Just playing some games, chilling with some friends.
Are you into the whole Lost Ark trend right now?
I am not. That is not my type of game.
Or Pokemon? Those seem to be the popular picks these days.
I did play through Pokemon Legends Arceus very recently. That I very much enjoyed.
Okay, let's go ahead and go break down what's going on in the Storm Division for you guys here. We're just going to do a quick recap of the teams for those of you who might not have been keeping up with who's even in Storm Div. You know, it's only been a couple weeks. Maybe you haven't been able to catch the matches. Maybe you weren't keeping up with who qualified. We'll give you a quick rundown. Starting with Anticlown Association, also kind of known mostly as Diamond Hands. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too much in depth. If you guys want to go back and watch my previous show covering Storm Div, we broke down all the rosters and talked about each of these teams and kind of expectations for them there. But yeah, Anticlown Association is basically Diamond Hands, so expecting them to do fairly decent in Storm Division, and so far they've been performing fairly well. We have Baby Makers. This is the Heroic Division winners from last season who qualified by winning Heroic Division. So they're here. I'm really curious about this team. Excited to see how the season progresses for them. Slug, any thoughts on these teams? So we're kind of just going through them quickly here.
I mean, ACA is obviously a good team because, I mean, they're basically just Diamond Hands. They, I may or may not have lost to them yesterday in a 3-0 fashion, which wasn't fantastic, but it was a fun series to play. I mean, we're still messing around with role swaps and stuff, so we'll see how it goes later in the season. Baby Makers I know a bit less about. I know some of the players on there. Lupus and Cheekies I've kind of seen before, and Dead Wish I want to say is on there as well. They beat CCS last week, if I remember right.
Yeah, we're going to actually break down kind of what happened with the matches that have happened so far. So, no, we'll believe the spoilers for now, and we'll keep going here. We have Can Censorship. They've kind of been putting in the work with HRCS, slowly grinding it out. Maybe they're scaling. Maybe. I don't know. The matches make me think they maybe are. We have $1 Million JPEG. For those of you who don't know, that's Goon. He's in chat right now. That's Goon's team. I think they're a wild card. I'm interested to see what they do this season, but it could be really great or really bad. I don't know. Their team is definitely wild card. That's the best way, nicest way I want to phrase it.
I think that's the perfect way to phrase it. That is exactly what I would call them. I really have no clue what to expect from them, except from nothing normal is what I expect, basically.
We have Baby Diamond Hands. This is a team we're going to be casting tonight. They're taking on Wild Heart Omega after our pre-show here. This is another team. They've been grinding it out in things like Heroes Rise Contender Series before Storm Division picked up. They're a team that qualified based on points, though. They never actually won a qualifier. So, Goon saying, gee, thanks. They never actually won a qualifier, so we'll kind of get into what I think that means when we were looking at, these teams in comparison in the tier list later. We got Preworkout Power. This is a interesting team. It's a bit of used to be not fans and a mix of some of the CCL players. Vince has been playing with them. CPX has been playing with them. And they actually had Heavy subbing for them last night as well. So another wildcard team, but in a different way because it's not a full CCL roster. It's a mix of CCL experienced players and, players that have just been around in the scene for a while. We got, We Take It the Wayeth. Slug, what's up with this team?
It is pretty much the main Wildheart squad for CCL, but instead of Lupus playing, because he's playing on Baby Makers, we have Infrared. Tremor pretty much, I don't think has played like a single game right now because he's dealing with school stuff for the most part. So we're kind of just having some fun with some role swaps, kind of messing around with it. We're taking it obviously we're not not taking it seriously, but we're kind of having a little bit more fun with it. So, it's make it interesting as the season goes on.
And last but not least, we have Wildheart Omega. This is the Academy team from Wildheart here, and that's the other team we're going to be casting this evening. They also have been grinding it out in things like Heroes Rise Contender Series and putting in the work as well. And I'm interested to see kind of how the season progresses for them, whether they're going to grow a little bit more or kind of remain stagnant. We'll break down a little bit what's happened with their matches so far when we get into the next couple slides here. But that's your Storm Division teams for this season. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the match results from week 1. We had Anticlown Association taking on $1 Million JPEG. If you've had a chance to look at the website, it says it's a 3-1, but it's actually a 3-2 because Anticlown Association forfeited their first match. They weren't able to yield a full roster on time for their first game. And $1 Million JPEG actually snuck in a win on them during that series as well. All in all, though, Anticlown Association coming out on top with the win in that series. We had Preworkout Power taking on We Take It The Wayeth, and We Take It The Wayeth coming out with a 3-1. Those two series, I predicted ACA and We Take It The Wayeth to come out with the wins there. But I got my predictions wrong for the next two series here. Wildheart Omega, and to tell the truth, the next two series are a lot closer in skill than the first couple series we're looking at. Wildheart Omega versus Can't Censorship. Can't Censorship actually came out with a 1-3. I will say, though, for that match in particular, Wildheart Omega was playing with subs for their team. They did not have Funds there, and they did not have Roger there. And I think, based on my own experience just playing in amateur competitive, having your tank subbed out is usually one of the more difficult roles to sub out, because he's the one that kind of, you follow into the fight. He's kind of the leader in a lot of these team fights, if that makes sense. So I think it's a big hit to have Funds missing, and then you also have Roger missing, which is arguably one of their strongest players on their roster. So probably affected the outcome of that match there. I think it could have been a lot closer, especially if they had their main roster. I will say, though, that it does appear CCS, like I said, is potentially scaling here. Maybe they really are better than a Wildheart Omega team with a full roster and not using subs, but we'll never know until we get to the playoffs now. And then lastly, we had Baby Makers versus Baby Diamond Hands. This was another match. I was not sure how it was going to go. I gave it to Baby Diamond Hands in my prediction because Baby Diamond Hands has been working in HRCS. I've been seeing them scrim a lot, and I haven't really seen Baby Makers doing, or I haven't heard of them doing too much before Storm Div. So I gave it to Baby Diamond Hands, but Baby Makers actually coming in here with a 3-1 into Baby Diamond Hands. And I think this kind of solidifies what I've been saying in previous pre-shows, is that the upper end of Heroic Div and the lower end of Storm Div are a lot closer in skill than maybe previous seasons we've seen here. Yeah, Baby Makers without too much preparation coming in and able to take a 3-1 onto Diamond Hands. Slug, any thoughts on these matches from week 1?
I did think the Baby Makers one was interesting. I wasn't expecting them to show up as much as they did. But overall, I thought, the Omega one, when they had the sub, like when I found out they had the subs, that series went probably about how I'd expect. Otherwise, $1 Million JPEG got a game off of ACA, so, that's a good sign. Overall, it'll be curious to see who kind of bounces back between Diamond Hands and Omega tonight.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't think Wildheart Omega has lost a series to them before, but we'll see how it plays out tonight. From what I've heard, Wildheart Omega isn't going to have any subs. They're going to have their full roster, unless that's changed from the last time I touched base with them, but we'll have to see. Move on, because there is a couple matches that have already concluded this week. We'll talk about the results from those really quickly. We had We Take It The Wayeth taking on Anticlown Association. So this is basically, Anticlown Association is basically Diamond Hands full roster playing in their regular roles from CCL, taking on Wildheart's roster minus Lupus at Infrared, but you guys are not playing in your main roles. There's some role swapping going on, and maybe a little bit of, some players getting more comfortable in roles they're not used to playing. This series ended off in a 0-3 in favor of Anticlown Association. I'm sure Slug has some thoughts and things he could share since he is on the team.
I can talk about each game. First game, we were ahead most of it. We just didn't quite close it out very well. We kind of took like 2 or 3, about 3 bad fights just in chokes against a Hogger that were kind of just through the game. And second game, the comp we were running was one that like I'm used to playing. So it's like with Joe Diablo, I'm playing off the tank heavily, and I'm more used to playing off of Tremor. So it's a little harder for me to like find where I need to be positioned or like, you know, what I'm trying to do when the tank's a bit different. The third game was just overall, I think it was just a little bit of a play diff there. We kind of just didn't get as much value off our turn-ins as I think we needed to in the early game, and they were getting pretty good value.
Yeah, I kind of wrote down in my notes that like overall kind of looked like a bit of a rough series for you guys, but you're still getting comfortable in new roles with Mason tanking and working with Infrared in the roster now instead of your typical 5-man that we saw from CCL. So it's not, you know, it's not your exact CCL team coming in here like Anticlown Association. It's literally their Diamond Hands roster playing the roles they normally play off a fresh season of CCL without any changes. So, but yeah, 0-3 there. We'll move on to the other match that happened last night, and it was Can't Censorship versus Pre-Workout Power. And here's why I'm starting to think CCS might be scaling a little bit. We had Heavy subbing in. So there's the one CCL player. We had CPX playing. There's another one. And we had Vince playing as well. So 3 of the 5 members are players with CCL experience. With CCL experience on their roster here. And this series ended up in a 3-1 for CCS. That was surprising to me. I was not expecting that.
I did not watch the series because I think it was going on at a similar time to ours.
Yeah.
And also, honestly, I was just so focused. Even after our series, I was like rewatching our stuff. But that is kind of surprising. I would not expect that out of CCS. But I don't quite know what happened during the series, so it's kind of hard for me to talk about like where things went wrong, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to watch last night, so I didn't catch all of it in depth. I had it on my side monitor when I was playing in Nexomania. So I just watched them, and I just kept looking over it. I kept seeing the score go up for CCS, and I kept seeing them win these fights and stuff, and I was very surprised. I'm not going to lie. I was surprised. And I know CCS has been putting in the work with Heroes Rise Contender Series, and I'm wondering if maybe just something is clicking for them now, if having that more consistent 5-man in their roster, you know, they're not really subbing players out anymore. They've decided this is our 5-man, if this is helping them at this point too, and they've kind of found their stride a little bit potentially here. So CCS is a team I'm really interested in keeping an eye out here because I was not expecting this outcome versus Pre-Workout Power. I'm really excited to see what they do taking on, like We Take It the Wayeth or Anticlown Association as the season goes on. A little bit stronger teams, I would say. Yeah, any last words on that one, Slug?
I don't think I really have anything for that.
Yeah, I just want to watch and see what they do. Was it a fluke? Was it just, you know, a bad night for Pre-Workout Power? Or is CCS really scaling and they're now a team that, like, people need to watch out for maybe?
I do. I have to go back and watch this series now because I didn't know that's how it ended.
Yeah. Okay, so tonight we have Baby Diamond Hands taking on Wild Heart Omega here. Let's talk about a little bit what we think is going to happen in this series and who do we think is going to come out on top. For me, I think it's going to be Wild Heart Omega. Maybe I have a little bit of bias there, but just going off previous history between these teams, Wild Heart Omega has pretty consistently beat Baby Diamond Hands in the past. So I'm kind of expecting them to do it tonight. I don't think it's going to be a 3-0 necessarily. Maybe we'll end up with a 3-1 or a 3-2 here, but I am expecting Wild Heart Omega to end up being the winners. What's your thought, Slug?
So I think they're mainly their main roster. I'm not sure if they're full main roster today because I know Roger has been having internet issues this week.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if they're full, but with Hiva in, I think when Hiva fills in at range, I think it's generally okay. I would expect them to win here, but I haven't seen as much recently from Baby Diamond Hands, so I'm not too sure. I think this one could definitely go either way, but I would favor Omega.
Yeah, I think it kind of does hinge a little bit. If they do have their full roster tonight, I think this is a much easier win for Wild Heart Omega. If they're using subs again, a little bit more difficult of a series for them here, but ultimately, I think it probably will lean to Wild Heart Omega, but maybe Baby Diamond Hands will surprise us. Who knows? The last series for this week that hasn't happened yet is $1 Million JPEG versus Baby Makers. I think this one's going to be another interesting series to watch because you're kind of figuring out where do these teams that are a little bit newer to the division, haven't really been around in HRCS, where do they really fall in the skill level in comparison to other teams? We've seen Baby Makers win against Baby Diamond Hands with a 3-1. We've seen $1 Million JPEG take a game off of Preworkout Power, right? I think that was it. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see these two teams play out, and it's going to get us a better understanding again of kind of where these teams lie in a tier list kind of thing, which we're going to go to next. But ultimately, I think this one's going to go over to Baby Makers. And as sad as that makes me to say that, because I'm a little bit of a $1 Million JPEG fan, because I think that they kind of have a consistent roster. From what I've heard from some of their players, they're very comfortable playing together. They get along really well. They've been trying to get in at least one scrim every week, and I don't think they have any. Oops. Well, we skipped ahead. I don't think they have any plans here to use any subs. And from what I've heard of $1 Million JPEG, they're having a little bit. You know, they're not always having their full 5-man playing. They've had subs, I think, last week, and they're going to have subs tomorrow as well, and I think that's going to kind of hinder their performance. So I think it'll go over to Baby Makers, but who knows? Okay, we got the tier list here. Slug, anything about Baby Makers versus $1 Million JPEG that you want to mention before we break down this tier list?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to think of Baby Makers right now, because I would have expected them to, how do I put it? I did not expect them to kind of come out of the gate with that initial win.
Yeah.
It'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
To see what ends up happening for them. And then $1 Million JPEG, they're just like, I don't even know half the time what to think with them. Sometimes they're like, I'm like, wow, they look really good. And then sometimes I'm like, they're all over the place. So we shall see.
Yeah,
but that does make them very exciting. They're definitely a very kind of volatile team.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a cool series. I don't know if that eventually got a caster or not. Last I looked, it didn't have a caster, but maybe that's changed. I'll check for us before we end the show here. Let's take a look at this tier list. There's a little bit of shuffling around here. So originally we take the Wayeth up in the S position. Maybe I was a little bit biased. But we kind of swapped that around. We've moved up Anticlown Association. Now that I know that it's a Diamond Hands roster and they're not planning on changing rules up or doing anything out of the ordinary from what we've seen them do in CCL, we're putting them up to S tier. And now that they also 3-0'd, we take it the Wayeth, unfortunately. I think they kind of deserve that spot. Thoughts, Slug?
No, I'd say this looks fairly accurate. I'm unsure where Baby Makers is going to slot in. I think they may end up a little higher.
Yeah.
$1 Million JPEG, I think, has pretty, again, as I was saying before, they could end up higher, lower.
It's
Preworkout
really...
Power is like, I'm not sure where Preworkout Power is actually going to end up, because they've seemed a little weaker than I thought they would be.
It's really a toss-up here. I mean, Baby Makers has essentially won a series against arguably one of the weaker teams in the division. It's a team that's qualified based on points, a team that, hasn't even won series against some of these other teams that I have ranked above them, and Baby Makers comes in and 3-1s them. So I don't really know if that puts them... I didn't move them. They were in C tier last week. I didn't move them because they beat one of the more weaker teams, I would say, in the division. So I don't really know if that makes them, necessarily up in B tier yet. And I moved down $1 Million JPEG from B tier to C tier, and I know they took a game off of who did they play? Sorry.
ACA?
ACA, yes. I know they took a game off ACA, which is kind of huge, but at the same time, I know they're having a lot of issues fielding their full roster, and I don't know if that side of it is going to affect them, and they might have the skill, but if they can't get all their players together at all the same time to make these matches, that ultimately also plays a factor into what I was thinking when I made this tier list. Yeah, we've dropped CPX, or well, the logo CPX, but pre-workout power down a tier as well. I think I had them listed in A tier going into last week's series. We moved them down to B tier. CCS taking a 3-1 into them was kind of a huge deal. So CCS is now moved up and listed first in the B tier. Wildheart kind of middle of the pack, which is kind of what I was thinking. Kind of where I was thinking they would land, and we'll see what happens after tonight's series. I don't think Wildheart wins here. That doesn't really change the tier list that much, but tomorrow Baby Makers beats JPEG, $1 Million JPEG. We'll switch it up a little bit, and yeah, that's basically it. Slug, any last thoughts on this before we wrap up?
I don't think I have any. It's a pretty good tier list.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, best of luck to the teams that still have matches this week, and best of luck to the teams playing tonight. We're going to take a quick break, get things set up for the cast here, and we should be back in less than 10 minutes to cast Baby Diamond Hands versus Wildheart Omega. Thank you so much for joining us for the pre-show. Stick around for the cast. It's sure to be a great series. I think these two teams are going to put on a good show tonight, and you won't want to miss it. We'll be back soon.